Hello and welcome to not another episode of Haga Plays, but the first new episode of Rewind and Play. Haga Plays will remain a thing, but I'm just gonna use that name for my Let's Play videos. Rewind and Play is a show I started a whole bunch of years ago together with a few university friends. We only made a few episodes, or should I say one 3-part special, before I rebooted it again a whole bunch of years later to market Cave Light Entertainment and our game Velocity Stream. If you haven't checked those out, check it out now. Anyways, after a long and grueling winter, I'm going to use this first special episode to celebrate the arrival of spring. I don't know about you guys, but whenever spring starts, I pull out a few games and I play the hell out of them just to get me hyped for the summer. So these are my 5 games that get me pumped for summer.
Number 5.
What sport is more summery than beach volleyball? I know what some of you are thinking, that this is another one of those beach volleyball games that basically only exist to justify grown men to look at scantily clad polygonal booty. However, this is a whole different beast. The best word I can think of is that it's more professional. The matches take place in actual arenas rather than beaches. The arenas do look good, with different props and nice lighting effects, making them differ from one another. Another nice detail is that the sand visually deforms as the players run across it. The ladies are attractive and dressed in bikinis, but they look closer to real-world pro players than to provocatively dressed girls in certain other volleyball games. The camera is placed in a functional position, rather than one that emphasizes on the character's anatomy. And there's a functional GUI that makes the game a snap to play. The only complaint one might have is the victory animations, which some may consider a bit sexualized. There's not really that much else that can be said about this game. In terms of gameplay, this might actually be the best volleyball game released to date. If you have another suggestion, let me know in the comments section below. However, that's all it is, a beach volleyball game. While there is quite a comprehensive career mode, where your players earn XP, which can be spent on improving their stats, the games failed to hold my attention long enough to make any real progress. The game would really need some alternate activities to introduce some variety. But then again, that's how I feel about all sports games. I can recommend this as a multiplayer game, as whenever I pull this game out and show it to friends, they first laugh at it and then are unable to put it down. It's pure and simple fun that's accessible, that's easy to learn, but difficult to master.
Number 4.
I don't know about you, but something that's quintessentially summery in my book is driving a nice car with the windows down, the wind blowing through your hair, and cool music blasting through the speakers. In Crazy Taxi, you do just that. You play as one of 4 flamboyant taxi drivers and use classic American convertibles to take passengers from point A to point B as fast as possible. Your passengers are as crazy as the drivers, so they gladly give you extra tips for jumping, drifting, and generally just driving very dangerously. The environments are well suited for this, with plenty of hills and ramps to jump over. The vehicle physics are quite simple, with cars neither having a tendency for over or understeer. Instead, players can do crazy maneuvers like drifting and so on. This is a tremendously fun game, played in short bursts. A standout feature is, of course, the very famous soundtrack, featuring 8 or so songs from The Offspring and Bad Religion. It really sets the pace for the gameplay, making you want to drive faster. Soundtracks featuring lyrics usually become annoying after a while, especially when the selection of songs is this small. However, I can't put my finger on it, but for some reason, that's definitely not the case here. While the game is short on content, only featuring 2 environments and 5 cars, you'll get a fair bit more out of the game if you play the challenge mode, which is called Crazy Box. In this mode, you get to perform all manners of different tasks in especially made arenas. Personally, I would however still have liked to see a more substantial campaign mode. But alas, this is a video about summary games, so there's no point in complaining over a game that thoroughly entertains you for a short while and then makes you want to go out into the actual sunshine. This is one of the most ported games of all time, with versions existing for everything from the obvious arcade and Dreamcast versions to, among others, the GameCube, PC, PlayStation 3, Game Boy Advance, PSP, and even smartphones. Apart from the Game Boy Advance version, all the versions are quite equal in quality. There are basically 3 major differences. Most versions seem to have less vibrant colors than the Dreamcast version, and at some point, Sega replaced the famous soundtrack with a new one, which is by many considered inferior. A third, less notable difference is that all of the licensed locations have been replaced with fictional brands.
Number 3.
This game is on the list for basically the same reasons as Crazy Taxi. Outrun 2 is basically a simulation of what many people wish motoring would be like. Driving at breakneck speed in a gorgeous Ferrari, past breathtaking vistas, with a lovely girl by your side. And the girl isn't just there to look pretty, she's actually quite central to the gameplay. You see, Outrun 2 isn't a regular racing game where you take 3 laps around the circuit and aim to be in first place. Instead, you have to impress the girl by driving as far as possible before the time runs out, earning extra points for overtaking traffic and drifting. If this sounds sexist, then yeah, I certainly hope that this doesn't return to the next Outrun. But fortunately, this isn't so over the top and doesn't get in the way of the core game mechanics. When this game originally came out in arcades, the graphics were a revelation. The cars, about 10 convertible Ferraris, ranging from classics like the Dino and Daytona to more modern selections like the Enzo and F50, were remarkably well modeled, and the surroundings were breathtaking. In all truth, not all tracks are summer themed, with some having a quite distinct autumn or even winter setting. But regardless, all locations are still places you like to zoom through in a convertible Ferrari. A core feature in this game is the vehicle handling, which is anything but sim-like. This is the game that introduced the drifting mechanic that's common in pretty much all modern arcade racers, such as the Need for Speed franchise. Basically, hit the brakes and then slam the accelerator back down again when entering a corner, and the car will enter a very easily controlled drift. In fact, entering drifts is probably the only time you'll let go of the accelerator button. The sound design is really well suited to the summery feel, as the cars do look like Ferraris, yet are discreet enough to not annoy you after a long play session. Outrun 2 was popular, but not as popular as Crazy Taxi. As such, it didn't receive as many ports. In fact, you can really cut it down to 3 very distinct different versions. The first and most well known was quite simply called Outrun 2. It's an Xbox exclusive and stands out by having additional bonus tracks from Scud Race and Daytona USA, which no other version has. Later, there was a version called Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast, which added an extra 15 all-new tracks on top of what was featured in Outrun 2. This version was available for Xbox, PC, and PS2, although all versions are a visual downgrade from the original Xbox version. Outrun Online Arcade was released for the PS3 and Xbox 360 and is the most recent version, and obviously it's the most striking to look at. However, when creating this version, Sega wanted to keep the file size down, so it only features the 15 new tracks from Outrun 2006, none of the originals. This is, however, the most difficult version to get a hold of nowadays. You see, this version never received a physical release, and as Sega's Ferrari license expired in 2013, the game became unavailable for purchase.
Number 2.
Second on my list is a game that almost seems to have been specifically made for a list like this. Grand Theft Auto Vice City takes inspiration from classic Miami Vice TV show as well as Scarface. It takes place in a parody of 80s Miami, so it can barely get more summery than that. The day and night cycle is breathtaking to behold, with the sky displaying all manner of colors. The sea has a gorgeous tone, and the city itself features a lot of truly memorable areas. This is a much less serious game than GTA 4 and 5. The talk show channels are less subtle in their humor. Missions are often flat out silly, and the weapon selection is more slapstick, including everything from screwdrivers to flamethrowers. All of this makes the game feel more lighthearted, kind of like a proper summer blockbuster. And all of that's great because had the developers aimed for a more overly gritty and realistic look and feel, the game would have probably been quite more dated at this point. Whether you're speeding down the highway in a Ferrari Testarossa, driving a beach buggy across the long beach, or pound the waves in a speedboat, you can't avoid that summery feel. The sound design, as well as small touches like your character's clothes flapping in the wind as you ride a motorcycle at speed, further strengthens this. And don't get me started on the radio stations, which feature high-profile music from artists like Michael Jackson. Vice City is available for a variety of formats, including PC, PS2, Xbox, and mobile devices. A prequel was also released for the PSP and PS2 called GTA Vice City Stories.
Number 1.
Number 1 on this list was very close to not making it on here at all, solely because of Nintendo's copyright policies. But really, with my videos having earned a grand total of 15 cents at this point, it's not really like I'd be losing a tremendous amount of revenue, unless this becomes my breakthrough video. Then I'll get pissed. Splatoon is a third-person shooter where players compete for which team can cover the most of the map in their own color before the timer runs out. A core mechanic is that players can swim around in the areas of the map that's already covered in their colors. Don't ask me how that works, but when submerged in that own color, your ink supply refills. Yet again, don't ask how that's supposed to work. Obviously, with the goal of the game being to cover the whole level in color. The game is really colorful. But even before you splatter your ink all over the place, everything still is very nice and summery, with the sun shining and several maps taking place near the ocean. The game's highly inspired by youth culture, with levels being inspired by shopping malls and skate parks, and a big part of the game being to customize your character in a way that reflects your personality. This depiction of consumer culture feels strangely akin to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Splatoon is one of the most joyous game experiences of the past decade. Nintendo need to be commended for continuously filling the game with new content. Over a period of about 18 months after release, Nintendo made numerous patches, introducing new free levels, weapons, new clothing, and perhaps most importantly, new game modes. The gradual introduction of new features meant that the game managed to stay constantly fresh. Every few weeks, the game would feature a new Splatfest. Splatfests were time-limited events where players would choose to represent one of two things. For example, Autobots versus Decepticons. During this time, the hub world would change to a night setting, and players who'd play enough during the Splatfest would receive one of two special pieces of clothing to wear. The game features a quirky soundtrack, which can only be described as some sort of J-rock. There's something insanely fresh about how it sounds. Despite the game only being released in 2015, I already have highly nostalgic feelings towards. I have strong memories of the 2 summers when it helped me cope with the heat. When I came home from a long day of game development at the office to an unbearably hot apartment, took a shower, and sat by the open window playing Splatoon, or how it cheered me up after a long, hard day of telemarketing. And even whenever I got stuck on my master thesis, I'd turn around, turn on my TV and Wii U, and play a match or two of Splatoon. I'm highly looking forward to the sequel. So, those were my top 5 summery games. Do you agree with my list? What games do you play to get hyped for the summer? Leave your answers in the comments section below. And as usual, please like and subscribe. Until next time, have a good one.